In this video, we walk through the Supplier API integration process. I first want to point you over to our documentation website, docs.inbrain.ai. There in the API integration tab, we walk through everything from overview through API endpoints, callbacks, redirects, and some general specifications about the integration. We'll quickly run through some specifications. First of all, you can check our supported countries and languages here. These are currently the countries and languages we support, and as we add new support for additional geographies, we will add these to this documentation page. We'll come back to more specifications as we walk through the integration, but for now, we will head over to the inBrain publisher dashboard and walk through setting up your first app. So if you don't have access to the publisher dashboard, head over to publisher.inbrain.ai as it is here in my URL bar. And you can click sign up to create an account and then log in to access your dashboard as you see right here. The next step is to click add new app, and we want to add the Supplier API. So in this case, we're going to demonstrate this is Supplier API integration setup on a web application. So we'll go ahead and select web app. We're going to name our project, and this is just for labeling purposes. It'll show up over here on the left sidebar so you can access this project at any given time. And then we'll head over to app settings. I'll walk through the things that you're required to set up before testing. So first things first, if you have a currency economy, such as points or coins, you're going to want to put that currency name in here. If you're using dollars and cents, you'll put the name in as well. We'd recommend not using dollars. If you use dollars, obviously you're probably going to have to put in something fractional like 0.45 if you want to give 45 cents, for every $1 revenue earned. We actually don't support fractional values right now. So in this case, you would want to put cents. So cents like that, and then 45 cents is what you're rewarding your users for every $1 they earn your app in revenue through their survey completions. For this demonstration, we're just going to go with points. And we're going to say we're going to give 100 points to our users for every dollar they earn for us in revenue from survey completions. So that's the first step. You'll want to save that. Then head over to API keys and click show API keys. I'll show it on my screen here just because it's a demo and I'll delete it later. But I'm just going to copy that API key out to Notepad so I can use it here in just a bit. You'll want to set up redirects and server callbacks. These are both required. So we'll set up redirects first. Redirects, this completes the flow of the Supplier API integration. So you send your users into a survey. Once they complete a survey, are disqualified or terminated, they will be sent back to your application via this redirect URL. The redirect URL will contain additional information about the nature of their completion or disqualification. So that is documented in detail here under callbacks and redirects. You can look at client redirects and look at the parameters that are on those redirect URLs for both success links and the failure links. For testing purposes, I like to use webhook.site, and what you can do is you can just grab this URL up here as your redirect URL if you're testing. If you already have them, great, you can plug those in. But for testing purposes, for this demonstration, I'm just going to use these temporary URLs. So we'll click save there and note this shared secret key. The shared secret key here is going to be the same as what's on your server callbacks. So you want to note that there's some hashing specification and hash verification that goes on within the flow. We'll cover that in documentation, but you want to just note this shared secret key as you'll use that for hash validation and calculation. So I'm just going to drop that in Notepad, and already clicked save, so we're good there, and we're going to move on. Placement filters is something we can come back to later in a separate video that discuss placement filters by themselves. They're ways to specify a minimum or maximum reward or the length of survey. So you can set up different placements within your app and use them basically as filters for certain types of surveys you're looking for a given experience that you're trying to tailor for the users in your application. So we'll come back to that. We'll leave it alone for now. Survey wall link is another product covered in a different video. If you're interested in that, there is documentation here under survey wall link product. And let's see, so we've done our currency setup, API keys, redirects, now server callbacks. Same for server callbacks, you can use webhook.site, and we can just copy this callback right here. You can use different URLs, you can use the same URL. Actually, what did that copy out? Oh, for some reason there's a question mark. I'm just getting rid of that. I'm using the same URL for all intents and purposes of this demo, but we'll just save it and we get a shared secret key. You'll note that that shared secret key is the same as the one we copied from the redirects. Try to keep everything super uniform so that you don't get those mixed up when you're trying to do hash validation. All right, you can actually test these callbacks once you've saved and click saved here. You can actually test the survey completion succeeded. All you gotta do is click test postback. It'll use this URL and it will send some demo data to that postback URL. That's what your server should be anticipating. And you can actually see that come through right here. A little demonstration of some random data generated here in the postback. There is more documentation on server-to-server callbacks here on this tab, and you can go through the details of each field and property in this body. We detail out the purpose of each and what to look out for. So that covers server callbacks. The last thing you'll want to do to get set up for testing is add a test user. Now you might ask, why can't I just not add a test user and just test the full flow with real surveys? Well, the trouble is that sometimes testing real surveys in a development environment or in a development office is sometimes difficult because so the last thing you need to do is set up test users. You can just set up one test user for testing purposes. We highly recommend doing this before you go live. The only way you'll be able to see and return surveys is by adding a test user. So let's just go ahead and add one real quick. We're just going to say my testing user 009. And then we're going to paste the same thing for value. This is the actual user ID for testing. And this is just a label. So just want to note that user and then make sure test mode is checked. Click submit. So there it's saved as a test user, and we'll use that during the testing process. Currency sales is another topic. Just a way, currency sales is just another feature we have available to partners. We'll cover that in a different video since it's a little bit more of an in-depth topic. So we'll leave it for now and head back over to settings. All right, that's everything for testing and the setup process. You can actually head over to demo.inbrain.ai, and you can actually use your API key to test. So let's test this real quickly. I'm going to grab my API key. Grab that. It's already populated my IP address. And we will need that unique user ID. Need to actually grab that real quick. All right, unique user ID, and then we're just going to go with 1985, and we're going to go with let's see, we'll go with September the 21st. We're going to assume we're a male, and we're going to enter a one as a postcode. We're going to click fetch surveys. So what this is doing, and we actually just plug that in. What this is actually doing is taking your API key and the information that you would pass when fetching surveys and just demonstrating what that looks like. So when we click fetch surveys here, it'll return a list of surveys with the user reward based upon what we set here under settings for points. So we said basically we want to reward our users 100 points for every $1 in revenue, right? So if you look at this, and this is 101 points. Let's see if we have any that are even numbers. Yeah, so this is basically $1.01 in terms of revenue for you, and that's 101 points for your users. Estimated length, 9 minutes. You can actually click here to test those surveys. These are all going to be demo surveys. and it would test the complete flow of your redirects and everything. So if we actually open that up, and we can test completion or termination, we'll test that. There we go, 96 points completed. And take another survey, and that sends us back to our redirect URL. And in your case, it would be the redirect URLs to your application. But remember, we set this up to be the redirect URLs right here in redirects. So that's kind of the whole flow of things. Let's jump back over to the documentation and look at API endpoints. This fetch top surveys for user is the exact endpoint call that is being used in this demo when we click fetch surveys. So if you look here, you're basically going to fire off a GET request to api.inbrain.ai, ending in surveys. You're going to need to pass this header, which is your API key. So you'll grab that API key from right here, and you'll pass that along as a header. And then there's a few required things you have to add. The user ID, that's that unique user ID. So if you're testing, add that test user ID from the publisher dashboard. That's required. The IP address of the user, so that'd be if you're testing, that's going to be your IP address. This is not the IP address of your server. This is the IP address of the actual user. That's required. And right now, language, device types, and placement ID, these are not required. We would recommend if you're on desktop and you want to pass in device type, you can see the enumeration for the device types that we support, as well as if you have information on your user in terms of what language they prefer, then you can see our list of supported languages and pass those. But they're not required because we basically calculate those based on IP address and values that we can understand about the request. You do need to pass in gender, and you do need to pass in date of birth. These are additional parameters that are passed on that this GET request right here. And that's what's being demonstrated here on the demo. The gender, the date of birth. If you actually inspect this and look at the URL being sent, you'll see that they are added as URL parameters. The postcode, the gender, the date of birth. So those are required. Let's see if there's anything else in here. Yeah, we do give an example in curl, C#, and node.js. And then there's responses for rate limiting and so on. And then we do detail out everything we return. So we return unique identifier of the survey for your purposes of classification or anything you need to do with that on your end, as well as the entry link. Those are the most important. Obviously, the link is the most important. That's where you're going to send your user. Typically, you want to either send them in their current tab or open a new tab and send them to that link. And this is the reward for the user. But I digress, as everything is pretty well spelled out here in the documentation. Let us know if you have any questions on that. Should be pretty straightforward. Again, you can check this out at demo.inbrain.ai, and you can grab access to your publisher dashboard at publisher.inbrain.ai. You'll want to do before going live with your users is obviously to click go live. Your test users that you have set up will continue to see that those simulation surveys and test user flow. But once you go live, any user IDs that you pass in that are not here in test users will see live surveys, so you can test those out. Note that if you are in a country outside of our allowed country list, you won't see any surveys if you are not a test user. So just note that. But yeah, make sure you go in here, click go live. And before you go live, do touch base with your account manager. We want to make sure we have the right switches turned on, the right levers pulled, and your inventory configured just right for your user base. So glad to get that set up, and let us know if you have any questions.